Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. It's migration. We're getting some of the first species here, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also, we have some takes on the orange snowy owl that was seen in Michigan, and we launched an America's Favorite Warbler bracket where you can vote, and we're going to determine what America's favorite warbler is.
Yeah, that's a lot, Derek. We'll get started talking about migration because where we are in Wisconsin, we fairly recently got some of the birds back that are the initial arrivers. And it's always funny to me because one day they're not there and then suddenly they're all back. So one day you don't hear the blackbirds, the next day all of a sudden there's red-winged blackbirds coming from every direction. It's not always even just a trickle. Like there's one, there's a few, there's tons of them suddenly. So literally overnight they arrive in the state and the northern part of the country, and we end up with this really fun part of spring where you can feel the energy, you can feel the approaching arrival of hundreds of thousands of millions of different birds coming in.
Yeah, I remember there was a really cool graphic that showed the different waves of migration, because it is interesting how you can kind of predict this species is going to be first, then this next one, and things don't normally jump the gun. I have been seeing a lot more American robins though, which has been neat to see them out in the field.
I think
But
it's worth discussing American robins and Canada geese quickly too, because those are two birds that traditionally have thought of as signs of spring. And that's not really necessarily the case. A lot of them stay here year round. I mean, tons of Canada geese overwinter in this part of the country. Robins do when they can find food. So there is an influx of both of those birds. There's way more robins now than there were before, but it's not necessarily, oh, there's one robin, spring is here. But now that we have tons of them, it is a sign.
yeah, okay, I found the graphic. I think you'll like this a lot. If you're just listening, I'll describe it, but if you're watching, you'll be able to see this cool graphic from this article.
Oh yeah, wow, that's interesting.
So it has some of the first birds coming in like April 13th. It has swamp sparrow, hermit thrush, ruby-crowned kinglet, white-throated sparrow, moving into like palm yellow-rumped warblers, then the other warblers, catbirds. So it just kind of shows like the frequency of the different waves of migration. Even some things you could put down earlier, depending on where you are, is like sandhill crane, rusty blackbird, song sparrow. Um, even before
Woodcock.
some of this
Woodcock's the
shows
big
up.
one
Yeah,
that
so
everyone's
that'd probably
excited
be if
about.
you added in a March section. Oh, this is from Black Swamp Bird Observatory. So that's in Ohio, and they're starting in April 10th. So you kind of that earlier wave in March isn't included in this, but it's a really cool way to visualize it. I would love to kind of see this for like every bird in a region would be really cool.
You kind of do in a not so easy to digest format when you look at the bar charts on eBird. So you
Right.
can even go county or state and it shows when they're most frequently arriving. So that does give you some sort of nice look at, oh, this one's earlier than this one traditionally. Here's the peak of when this one comes through. So that's pretty cool. But I don't know about you. I love March birding because you feel the energy, like I said, and it's something I'll probably keep saying because you just feel this wave coming. Like the first birds arrive, you know there's going to be more on the way. It's kind of the calm before the storm, but with those first raindrops starting to fall, metaphorically speaking. So I always like to see the stuff in March. As you mentioned, the sandhill cranes, the rusty blackbirds are a huge one, and I think woodcock is probably the other one. But the duck migration, you get all the dabbling ducks that come up, the teal species, canvasbacks, and a lot of those are here during the winter too, but not in nearly as great numbers. So there's just so much coming up right now, even though it's not the prime time for migration yet.
Yeah, and this is interesting they included this. Does the West Coast experience waves? And it looks like to some degree they do, but I feel like the West really gets left out of all the fun as far as the conversations about migration. I've learned that most things bird feeding and just birding is so East focused. They're like, when do the hummingbirds return? They're only talking about the East. They're not talking about the West, and they're only talking about ruby-throated hummingbird. So I feel as though the West kind of gets left out of kind of that backyard birding culture. Most things when they just talk about it in the US, they're talking about the East. Definitely an
That's
East
it's
Coast, an
really that.
Eastern bias.
Yeah, it's really that Rocky, not Rocky Mountain Range. Oh wait, yeah, the Rocky Mountain Range. The Rocky Mountain Range out there kind of cuts the country to an extent, although there is all of the Great Plains in between that and what you'd consider the east, kind of east of the Mississippi. But you get different kinds of migrations out there. You get a lot of elevation-based migrations. Birds are moving up and down in elevation depending on how scarce the food is. It seems like it's just a lot more random out there and more based on food crops and things like that than it is in the East, where the East has that very reliable type of migration, although there is some of that in the West as well.
Yeah, it just seems as though people have gravitated to the East. I'm assuming there's more people feeding and it is more predictable. So people are like, let's just talk about the East. We're just gonna focus on that region. But I
Yeah, I
do
also
feel
think that
like
the East. Oh, I was gonna say I think the East kind of takes up most of the country too, because when you look at the range maps, a lot of these eastern species cut into the central part as well. So it's kind of like it's almost two-thirds of the country is labeled as East with those eastern bird species.
yeah, that's true. We were talking about this the other day, though. We have been doing a lot of traveling, and it kind of ruins migration to some degree. Because certain species that you would go out to find for the first time in the year, you may have already seen really well and not really feel the need to. Like, you went out and saw some Wilson snipes, and I was like, we had amazing views of Wilson snipes in Florida. I don't really feel the need to go out and see more. Yeah, I probably should just because they're fun to see. But it does kind of mess with your head a little bit. You're like, no, I already saw those. Like, I don't need to go see them for the year. So if you're doing like a state big year, probably just don't travel. Just stay in your state so you have that bug of wanting to see everything that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too because you forget which species you've seen for the state. So you just think, oh yeah, Wilson snipe, I've seen that this year. I know because I remember that I got excited about seeing these up
It's
close
the big
Wilson
year
snipes.
mentality.
Yeah, and then you think back and you're like, ah, that was Florida actually. So I guess I still do need to see it. Nathaniel and I went out, which we can talk about if you want to. It was a really
Yeah.
solid day. We were looking for geese and ducks, and there was I'll just start from the beginning. We really were trying to focus on seeing the different goose species around here. There's like five that come through regularly. You have the Canada, of course, cackling, which is the mini Canada, snow Rosses, and then greater white-fronted. And we went to Goose Pond, which is a really popular place just north of Madison, the county above Madison. And we got there and there's thousands of birds, tons of tundra swans, tons of different geese. And so we just started scoping the back parts of these flocks. And we actually had a goose slam. We saw all five of them. And we also had an interesting hybrid snow goose, Canada goose.
Hmm.
So that was actually the first one we found. So Nathaniel was like, snow goose. And then we looked at it more and we were deciding then that it was not, in fact, a snow goose, but a hybrid. And then we got Ross's goose next, which is, in my opinion, probably the hardest to find out of those five species. And then in the back, we saw snow geese. There was a blue morph. And then we also got really close looks at a blue morph when we were just driving down the road and there were some geese feeding in a field. And it was mostly cackling. And then that one snow goose that we got really close up looks at, which was really nice.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be out looking for geese. And I feel like we normally try to take at least one trip out to like Dane, Columbia to see them. And for people experiencing migration for the first time, I would say make the most of your spring because when we started, I was like, oh, we get two chances to see all this stuff, spring and then fall. But especially for warblers, I would way more I enjoy IDing them in the spring than the fall. And then you kind of get the different patterns of migration. So we have different species that come through in the fall versus the spring. So I would say make the most of your spring if you're a newer birder and you're kind of like, oh, we'll get another migration in the fall. It's like, nah, I'd go out now and see as many things as you can.
Yeah, I was thinking about how to optimize spring, and I think one really important thing is just to know when to look for the different birds. So if you look at all the birds in America, there are some that is actually easier to find in the fall than the spring. So around here, if you're tirelessly searching for a buff-breasted sandpiper, that's not really maximizing your time because you're going to have a better chance to find them when it's fall. And kind of the same with some of the sparrows as well. I feel like Harris's sparrows, you get them in both, but they seem a lot easier around here in the fall. So just knowing, oh, I don't really need to worry about that one as much because I do have an actual good chance to see that one versus some of the ones that you just don't see on the way down.
Yeah, it's kind of that thing where I remember there was a guy, I don't know if he was doing a lower 48 or something, but he just kind of took trips to the certain regions like at the peak times. And he ended up doing really well just because he was maximizing his trips with the most species as possible. So, and I do think you have to factor in burnout too, that if you're making individual trips to find something that you have a very slim chance when, a couple weeks later it'll be easier. Trying to minimize burnout as well.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot with our two friends who are, in my opinion, doing a big year, but they say they're not doing a big year. But something will show up for the first time. Like the other day, it was common loon. So they were all excited about trying to go see common loons. And it's a species that if you just look in a couple of the hot spots for other birds, you'll find a common loon. But they're like making a special trip to see common loons.
Well, I think it's a big group of common loons, so they want the
Right.
full loon
Yes.
experience, which I can understand.
Yeah, it's just funny because it'll be like it'll get reported for the first time in the state, and they're like, "We gotta go get it. It's here. Let's go see it." And if you just waited, you can get all that stuff. I remember the first year when we were really into birding, we were kind of doing a big year sort of thing, but we didn't know what we were doing. we had like 200 species for the year, and this was I think in like April or May we had like 210, and then some people went out and did a big year where I think they like eclipsed 200 or
Oh
got
yeah.
198, and we're just like, what? But that's what we have for the whole year, and you got it in
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah, I remember that. And then we didn't know what was rare or not. So I remember Pied Build Grebe showed up. We're like, oh, we gotta go get that. Like not knowing that they would be
The
everywhere a
first
couple
spring
months
though is
later.
so exciting because all that stuff does show up and you start to realize things that have been around the whole time but you just didn't realize. For instance, that pie bill grebe and we saw horn grebe the same day were at our local park. And we just probably never really thought to even look or notice that they were out there. I remember Easter we were at grandparents' house and there's hermit thrushes and yellow-bellied sapsuckers and brown creepers in their backyard that we never noticed.
Yeah, now you are getting me excited for spring, thinking about, the thrushes, and there's just so much you can see in a day. And I'm excited to do another spring big day this year. But I want to transition to that. There was a snowy owl in Michigan that had some orange color on it. And it was very patchy orange. Some national news articles came out trying to say it was a genetic mutation, which I think made a lot of people excited because, like, oh, rare genetic mutation, snowy owl. But upon further review and hearing what other birders had to say and people who kind of knew about that topic, thought that it was more likely he got sprayed with something. And it definitely looks patchy, like it was sprayed, at rest. And then once it moved its wings, then it was the patchy orange and white. And so we made a video about it. People had some funny theories
Fascinating
slash interest,
theories.
yeah, fascinating theories. Some of my favorite joke theories were it's just putting on orange for hunting season. That was a good one. Someone said it was an ink bomb because the owl was part of a bank heist. That was a fun one. But I think the two most likely theories are either de-icing fluid at an airport because it comes in orange. So, maybe someone was spraying an airplane, owl got in the fray, or it could have been intentional. Someone be like, hey, get out of here, owl, sprayed it with de-icing fluid. Could be. Or fire retardant, which I think almost makes more sense at this point because there's a specific type called Phosgene that looks kind of that fluorescent, and they just drop it from above. So if that owl was like up in a region where they were, putting fire retardant or testing it or using it for fires, it could have just got dumped on. I don't think it would really, maybe it wouldn't sense it as much coming from above. Maybe it was even asleep, and then it just had that color on it. And then it kind of looks like it's starting to fade, which is against genetic mutation as well.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it got hit more, especially from one side, almost as if
Yes.
the breeze was blowing one direction and just caught it. And the genetic mutation theory was interesting that that got any sort of leeway because I had to do a fair amount of research for the video that we made about it. And I learned that, I mean, I already knew about leucism, which is essentially a lack of pigment. So you get some really interesting pigment mutations in birds where they'll appear white or even just lighter in color. There was a really interesting picture I saw actually of an evening grosbeak that was leucistic, and that base color underneath the black color basically that they have on them is just yellow. So it was basically an evening grosbeak where wherever there was black, it was yellow instead. So that's that lack of pigment, and then you have melanism, which is going to be an increase in the pigment color. But what typically doesn't happen is a bird that doesn't have any of those pigment colors turns a different color completely. And you do have some things like that, like flamingos will turn pink because of what they eat, same with the roseate
Yeah, a lot of
spoonbills.
people mentioned the diet thing, but it was like the way that the color was on the bird, I don't think would make sense for diet. And
Yeah.
also, I think somebody in the comments mentioned erythrism. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but like when some animals do get more of an orange color, but it's not like as fluorescent as this. This is a very
No,
bright
and it was
orange.
so patchy as if there was a pattern to it. It didn't look like it was emanating from the bird, from where the feathers would be or anything like that. It looked like it was just splotched on there like it got painted. And I do think that the dropping the fire retardant material is probably what most likely happened. The de-icing fluid I researched and it made sense in one regard because they do spend time near airports, but the de-icing fluid is almost a paler orange and they spray it on usually very, very hot, which by the time it's sprayed, it could be cooling in the air, so maybe it could have hit the snowy owl. But you don't expect, I wouldn't think, to see that bright of an orange, but the fire extinguisher stuff that they put down is more of that bright orange. It's that fluorescent, really bright, really deep orange.
Yeah, and I think that with the airport stuff, it's so localized. Like it would have to be at an airport. It would have to be somebody spraying a plane. Like it feels like the occurrence of that would be a lot less than dropping fire retardant, where it's kind of just like a blanket thing. And I saw some pictures of people's houses. Maybe I can pull them up. They got coated with like the check, and it does look like it just kind of covers everything. So I feel like that has a lot of credence to it. But the main idea of it is that it does seem like here's the check, so you can see how bright it is.
I feel like also, oh yeah, that
It
looks
has
like
more of that like
exactly what it is.
fluorescent color too. And here's a like a house that they're cleaning because it got dumped on like somebody's house.
What's interesting is how pink it looks in some of those pictures.
I'm assuming it kind of varies because it looks pink. Like this
Oh,
looks
there's
more
one that looks really
orange.
orange.
Yeah, so if you can imagine that just like
That one,
dumping on a bunch of birds.
yeah, that one below it too, where your cursor is almost to the, no, it's on the right side. Yeah,
This
that
one?
one, which I think might even be the same plane, perhaps looks really good for it. It's just hard for me to imagine that it wasn't this, looking at how it looks and the tone of it and how it kind of does cover everything. With the snowy owl, you can see how underneath the feathers, where they would have
Mm.
laid on top, is white still.
Well, and
So
the
it
whole
just looks like it
stomach
got
is
coated.
clean.
Yeah.
But this feels like it's like a blanket, like bam, everything got covered. You would have to imagine other birds would have gotten hit with this too. And
Yeah.
I've been trying really hard to find pictures of other animals that have gotten like contaminated with that, or even some people said there was like a bridge someone was spraying like gray primer on and an owl accidentally got it and it looked similar to that, but it's hard to find photos of it. There were a couple studies with that check of like chicks, like if chicks got covered in it, and I think it is somewhat toxic. It's probably not great. I would think an adult bird would have a better chance of dealing with it than, a baby bird. But
Hmm.
it's definitely an interesting story. I kind of wish someone could have collected a feather or something just so we got 100% knowing what it was. But it reminds me of that story. I wonder if I can pull it up.
You're
Uh,
Mr. Can I pull it up for you?
well, I figure if we have the technology and people are watching, it's funnier with the images. I feel like people are just fascinated by different bird color mutations.
Well, I think the idea of a 1 in a million type bird, or 1 in 100 million type bird, really tickles a lot of people. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people that saw it, oh
All
wow,
right,
yeah,
ready
there
for
it
this
is.
one? Rescuers learned that the exotic bird they found was actually a seagull covered in curry. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Look at the eye of the bird. It's just like, why am I here right now?
It's like, why am I covered in curry? But
What
yeah,
kind of
bird.
gull is that?
Um, I'm not sure. I don't even know where this was. Spice Skull.
Spice gull.
Um, they call it a seagull in this article.
I don't know where Tewkesbury
Wait, is this
Gloucestershire
true?
is.
It says a seagull turned bright orange after it fell into a vat of chicken tikka masala.
Wow.
So was it actually somebody was like serving this, or was it dried?
I don't know. Is that
Oh,
it?
wow, it looks so much nicer.
Look at him. It looks much happier.
Is it just a herring gull?
I don't know.
We should be able to find out like where this was.
We gotta get Amar to talk about this instance. It
It's
doesn't
kind of
quite look like a herring gull, but maybe
it's
it
kind
is.
of funny they just like every article just refers to it as a seagull.
Yeah, no one really did the due diligence on that.
Vinny, named by veterinary workers in honor of the Vindaloo curry he was covered in. Well, we're getting different curries here. Is
I
that
like
the
how it
same
says
as
it had a
chicken tikka
pungent
masala?
smell, but was otherwise healthy.
There they are washing it. Yeah, they just say a seagull. Where I
Hmm.
don't even know where this was. Oh,
This is-
this is a different occurrence. In 2016, another seagull fell into a
Wait,
vat of chicken tikka masala as he tried to enjoy me. How often does this happen?
where's you can click on the Vail Wildlife Rehab Center. It might be Colorado,
It
if
could
that's the
be.
same Vail. Show us where you are.
I want to find out what like where they have all this Indian food that let's
Probably
see if
just a bunch of
BBC
gulls
knows.
lurking around an Indian restaurant or something.
Well, are they cooking outside where they have access to all this stuff? So this is about Vinny.
Tiggy Winkle's Wildlife Hospital is a great name for a wildlife hospital.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know if somebody knows more about this story, you can let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, but that's kind of what this reminds me of, and I feel like I am surprised that the genetic mutation theory got so much press.
Well, it sounds like they
And
talked to like one person that said that. It doesn't seem like they really did a lot of research on figuring out who thought what.
you know what it reminds me of? The Sasquatch stuff with Jeff Meldrum. He's like a guy that has a PhD, but he's a big Sasquatch believer, and they always talk about him when they're like scientists believe, and that's always Jeff Meldrum. That's kind of what this reminds me of.
Well,
It's
as
like we
long as
got one
one
person to
scientist
say it.
believes it, yeah.
And it could
Science
it could even
shows
be
that
where
it's a
they just kind of
mutation.
like, hey, look at this, like real quick, like could this be genetic? And it's like it could be. Like who knows
Yeah,
what the real story is?
yeah. I don't know. I would have been interested to see that interview.
Do you think it was an interview or just like an email?
I don't know. That's a good question, actually. It could have just been an email, but that if it was an email, that means you would have had more time to like look at it and try to decide what you actually believed about it. So it would make more sense if it was quick and it was just, hey, could this be genetic? And then like, yeah, maybe, without even really getting that much time to look at it. Because I feel like if you just give it a look, you can tell that something's not quite right there for a genetic mutation.
Yeah. Trying to figure out what kind of gulls these were. I probably herring. I don't know. It's tough.
It's okay. You're gonna have to
It's
just
tough
let it go.
without
It was a curry
context.
gull.
It was yeah. So we had one more thing we wanted to talk about was that we did create a bracket in honor of March Madness, which is beginning the full tournament today for America's favorite warbler. So we have a video on our Badgerland Birding Shorts channel where you can learn more about it. And then there is a link to vote where you have the different matchups. And somebody was like, oh, good thing you left Black Burnian out because that would probably clean up. And I'm like, we did not. It just had a first round bye. So you
Yep,
won't see every warbler in there, just the matchups. And then in the next round, those warblers that got a bye will then have their actual matchup. Did you include a picture of the full bracket in the video?
I did. Yes, there's a
Okay.
picture of
Yeah,
the
so you
full
can see the
bracket in the
full
video.
bracket.
Yeah, so we just did a random draw. We thought about putting ones that we thought were potentially going to get the farthest, but we didn't do that. We just randomized it. We did the same thing for America's Favorite Duck, which was pretty fun. And that final ended up being the wood duck versus the harlequin duck and the wood duck one, but very fine choices for the final there. We're really excited to see what people like about these warblers and which ones win because there's some that are obviously more colorful. There's some that are more drab that can be more difficult to find or are more rare. Like a good example is Kalima Warbler is one that's really tough to find. You can only really get it in one particular place in the US. Do people value that more than they value the ones that are more common but look pretty, like the Magnolia Warbler? You can use really whatever criteria you want to decide which one's your favorite. I also actually filled it out and I had trouble
I did
picking
too.
between some because I was like, ooh, this one's really pretty, but this one always makes me really excited to go try to find it.
I
So,
definitely think I just went on color. But it's tough with some of those rare ones because they're really like we included things like fan-tailed warbler and slate-throated redstart. They're really colorful, but then I'm like, one of them I think was up against black and white warbler. I'm like, black and white warbler is just such like iconic species as
yeah,
far as
what a
warblers go.
classic bird.
Yeah,
There
it's
was
hard to
some
vote
too
against
that
that.
I had a bias on if I'd seen it or not. So Slate the Red Start, if I would have seen it, I may have voted for it. But I was like,
You
ah,
begrudgingly made your picks. You're like, I can't vote for
yeah,
this.
I was
I've never
like, I
seen
don't have
it.
any business with you.
Yeah, I think I have an idea of what Warblers will do well, but there were some tough matchups in the first round. Ones where I'm like, we had this had to happen so soon.
There weren't many that I felt like that. I think
I
the one
did.
I'm most interested about is Connecticut Warbler. I want to see how good Connecticut Warbler does because I think that's a pretty nationally sought after species to see. But it is more drab. I mean, it looks very similar to the Mourning Warbler and the Nashville Warbler.
It's got a
So I'm
nice eye
curious to
ring
see.
though.
I think it would have been funny if we ended up with like Louisiana water thrush versus northern water thrush.
Ooh,
I know, or like
water thrush
Nashville Warbler
showdown.
versus Mourning Warbler.
I think some of the tough ones for me were Worm Eating Warbler and Swainson's Warbler because they're so cool and they act so interesting, but they are a little more drab.
What about like Ovenbird?
Ovenbird's got a lot of personality. You know, they'll just call all the time in the forest and they're kind of skulky, real feisty.
Aren't
I mean,
they
I think
teacher,
that's a good
teacher,
one.
teacher, teacher, teacher?
Yes.
Yep.
So that's a good one. But yeah, would love for everybody to vote. When does voting end? It's open
Voting
now.
ends on Monday. So you'll have time if you're listening to this when it first comes out. You'll have the weekend and then Monday until midnight to vote. And then Tuesday, I'm hoping to compile everything and get the next round ready to go right away so we can keep it flowing smoothly. Because there are a lot of rounds to get through. There's 54 Warblers total. And as Derek mentioned, there's some that have first round buys. So it won't be all 54 in the first round. It'll be some that get a buy and then play in the second.
So if
I
you
say
don't see
play as
it,
if they're having to exert themselves here.
if you don't see it, don't think it's just not in there. It's in there.
Yeah, the only
There was
ones.
nothing really excluded, right?
Well, we didn't add Brewsters or Lawrences, which are technically
Yeah.
hybrid warblers. We thought a little bit about having Audubon's yellow rumped and Myrtle yellow rumped, but we just included the regular yellow rumped as one category because they've not been split yet. So then there was also some wood warblers that visit Alaska that I did not add.
Yeah.
So that's really all that didn't get added. Everything else that even marginally shows up in the United States is in.
It would be funny to do as like an April Fool's joke a flycatcher bracket and just have the same picture for each one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a flycatcher bracket at some point, and I hope that we get like Willow and Alder against each other. See who wins
It'll
that one.
not have pictures, it'll just have vocalizations and people can vote on what vocalization they like the
A
best.
vocalization bracket would be interesting too.
That's
That
probably
would
something
be
that hasn't really been done is like what
no, that'd
voting
be
on the
kind of
most
tough to
beautiful
put
bird
together.
song.
You'd have to just have the bird and be like, which of these songs do you like best, and not play it, because otherwise, I feel like embedding that would be kind of challenging.
I don't know if you could do like a picture and you had the clip. It would be some work, but be
Maybe when
interesting.
we've run out of other birds to do, but we still have a long way to go. We still have shorebirds, flycatchers,
The other group
sparrows.
that I thought would be fun that people suggested was owl.
Yep, that was kind of the second choice. I thought about doing both, but then thought that might be too much. So we just did
Yeah, let's
warblers.
focus
Might
on
do owls
warblers.
next year.
Yeah, owls would be fun.
I do like the bracket stuff. It's a lot of work to put together, but I enjoy seeing how it does, and I hope that it gets spread around a lot so a lot of people can participate because I think it'd be fun to get really as many votes as we can so that it's more accurate, I suppose.
Yeah, so make sure to share that. It's over on our Badgerland Birding Shorts channel. So we used to host the stuff on our main channel, but we moved it over to the Shorts channel. That's kind of where we put like extra stuff that's not, we put our podcast on there. There's little clips of like, our friend Sparky talking about Boreal Owl being the cutest owl, like fun stuff like that. So make sure to check out that channel and subscribe. And if you have any comments on gulls covered in curry, snowy owls that got turned orange, spring migration, or the warbler bracket, let us know in the comments below. Thanks everybody for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.